If you have never opened a Bible, you might be surprised to learn that it is not written like fiction or a legend. Instead, it reads more like a historical record, straightforward, accessible, and full of details. And the details give us an opportunity to fact check and learn if the authors are being honest. If they are describing real events or just making up stories. So in this video, we are going to look at and fact check some of the places and people mentioned in the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the first four books of the New Testament, and right here. And they record Jesus's life, ministry, death, and resurrection. And so as we go through each example, I want you to keep in mind that the Gospel authors wrote these books during the first century. There was no modern technology, so no internet, no audio recordings, no video recordings, no existing books about Jesus. And all three authors were also, or four authors were, of the four authors, three were living in different countries than they were writing about. So to get the details right, they would either need to be or have access to the eyewitnesses to the events that they're describing, right? It would be really hard to write about someone's life without the internet unless you knew that person or knew someone who knew that person. Okay, so let's get into it and see how the Gospels details align with historical records and archaeology, or to put it another way, whether or not the Bible is accurate. Let's start with geographical features and landmarks. So the Gospels describe the locations where key events in Jesus' life took place. And this includes really well-known cities like Jerusalem. It also includes lesser-known towns like Capernaum and even unknown villages like Bethsaida. So the descriptions mention city layouts, landmarks, the travel times between cities, the locations and elevations and the relationships between different cities, and so much more. And exciting all around, these details align consistently with historical and archaeological discoveries. For example, in Luke chapter 4, verse 31 says, "And he, Jesus, went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee." So here, by saying that Jesus went down to Capernaum, it's a subtle detail, but we can see that the Luke author understands the local geography because Capernaum is lower in elevation than Nazareth, where Jesus had been coming from. So let me give you another example. John chapter 5, verse 2 mentions a specific landmark in Jerusalem. It says, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which has 5 roofed colonnades." Well, archaeological findings have confirmed the existence of this very pool, validating John's description. You can Google it and see for yourself if you like to. Okay, here's one more example in this category. So in Mark chapter 1, verse 16, the gospel describes Jesus encountering 2 of his disciples for the first time. It says, "Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he, Jesus, saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea." So here, this casual mention of Simon and Andrew casting a net into the Sea of Galilee aligns with what we know about the sea's historical use as a fishing hub in the first century. And this has been supported by archaeological discoveries like the Galilee boat, as well as fishing tools found in nearby towns. Again, this is more stuff you're welcome to look up. And these are just 3 examples, but there are many more I could share. And in every case, we see that the gospel author's description is accurate. And it's not just the big details that they get right, they also accurately describe lesser details like local plants. For example, Luke chapter 19, verse 4 describes an event where a man named Zacchaeus climbs a tree to see Jesus, and Luke writes, "So he, Zacchaeus, ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way." So this is an extra cool detail because sycamore fig trees didn't grow in Antioch, where Luke lived, the author, but they did grow in Jericho, the city he's describing. So again, without modern technology, getting this type of detail would be nearly impossible unless Luke, or someone he knew had been there. And this isn't the only time the gospel authors mention and are right about plants. They include lots of quotes from Jesus' teachings, where Jesus himself mentions local plants, local weather, farming practices, all that would be familiar to his audience. For example, in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a mustard seed. Or in Mark chapter 11, Jesus curses a barren fig tree. And in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus talks about the lilies of the field. All of these plants are native to the region, showing that the gospel authors understood the places where they were writing about. Okay, we're going to go a layer deeper now and look at the names within the gospels. So the people who lived in the places that the gospel authors are describing. So as you know, the popularity of names changed depending on the place and the time. So this was true of ancient names as well. The Gospels focus on Jews from Judea, where the most popular names were Hebrew or Aramaic, influenced by Jewish identity and traditions. And so this included names like Simon and Joseph for boys, Mary and Salome for girls. There's others, of course. But compare this to nearby regions, like just 300 miles away, we see different name trends. For example, the most popular names for Jews in Greco-Roman Egypt were Greek, Egyptian, or Roman. And this included names like Alexander or Ptolemy for boys, or Cleopatra and Bernice for girls. And here's where we're going with this. So if the gospel writers are accurately describing real people, real Jewish people from first century Judea, then those names should match the names of people from first century Judea, not from first century Greco-Roman Egypt or anywhere else. Well, in 2002, the German researcher Talleyrand published a book on Jewish names from antiquity, including those from first century Judea. And then later that year, English scholar Richard Bauckham analyzed the work to see whether the names common in the first century Judea aligned with those in the Gospels and Acts, which is the fifth book of the New Testament. Let me see. Yeah, it describes events from the same time and place. So Bauckham found that the names did align. For example, the 9 most common male names made up 41.5% of recorded names in historical sources and 40.3% of names in the New Testament. And then for female names, the top 9 names accounted for 49.7% in historical records and 61.1% in the New Testament. That's why the Gospels mention so many Simons and Marys, because they were among the most popular names in first century Judea. And the Gospels writers' ability to reflect this accurately supports the idea that they were writing about real people, not just inventing names. So not only that, but the Gospel authors get the name usage right as well. You know how we add extra details to names that are common so that people know who we're talking about? For example, I have a lot of Jessicas in my life. And so when I'm talking to someone else about one of them, I won't just say Jessica. Rather, I will say, Jessica from work or Jessica Johnson, so that it's clear who I'm talking about. Whereas I don't need to do this with less common names like Jeremiah. I know one Jeremiah. And the gospel authors do this same thing. So when a name is common, like Simon or James or John or Mary, they do add these extra details to clarify who they're talking about, whereas they don't do this for the less common names. I'm going to give you an example. I'll give you a couple examples. Okay, so Mark chapter 3, verses 16 through 19 lists the 12 disciples and says, "These are the 12 he appointed. Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. And then Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him." So notice how common names like Simon and James include these extra details, either a nickname like Peter, a descriptor like Simon the Zealot, or a reference to family origin, such as James, son of Zebedee, or James, son of Alphaeus. But that's kind of like us using last names. But then other names like Andrew, Philip, and Thomas require no extra identifiers because they weren't as common. So everyone already knew who they were who they referred to. And examples like this come up again and again throughout the Gospels. I'm going to give you a couple more examples. So John chapter 1, verse 43 mentions Philip, a less common name, with no additional details. Whereas Mark chapter 6, verse 14 mentions John and specifies that he's John the Baptist to make sure that he wasn't mixed up with one of the other many Johns. So again, this shows that the gospel authors are writing about real people, not make-believe, and importantly, that they expect and want their audience to understand who they're writing about. Okay, and that's not all. But beyond the common names, the Gospels also cite specific people we can fact check. So one example is Pontius Pilate is mentioned in all 4 Gospels, as well as the book of Acts and 1 Timothy, where he is portrayed as a Roman governor or the prefect of Judea who sentences Jesus to death, even though he believed Jesus was innocent. Well, in 1961, archaeologists uncovered a limestone block in Caesarea Maritima with an inscription in Latin that reads, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. And so this artifact, known as the Pilate Stone, is direct evidence that Pilate held the position the gospel authors describe. Archaeologists also discovered some coins minted during Pilate's rule, which just further confirms his historical presence. So Pilate is not just a character in a story, a bad guy in a story. He was a real Roman governor ruling over Judea, just as the Gospels claim. Another example is Caiaphas, who is also mentioned in all 4 Gospels, as well as Acts. And he is portrayed as the leader of the Jewish ruling council, the Sanhedrin, and specifically as the high priest who played a key role in the plot to arrest Jesus. So according to the Gospels, Caiaphas argued that Jesus should be put to death, accusing him of blasphemy for claiming to be the Son of God. So in 1990, archaeologists found the ossuary of Caiaphas, which is a stone burial box inscribed with Joseph, son of Caiaphas, on it. And most scholars agree that this burial box belonged to the high priest written about in the Gospels. It has an intricate design that suggests the person inside held high status, which matches what we know about Caiaphas from the Bible, as well as historical records. So there are many other examples I could give, like there's Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, James, the brother of Jesus, and, of course, Jesus himself. I could keep going with more examples in this category or other categories, and in the next couple of weeks I will dive deeper into historical records outside of the Bible that corroborate the same events described inside the Bible, and we'll also explore the motivations and trustworthiness of the individual authors. But every time the takeaway is this, or this is what I'm finding, is that the Gospels aren't mystical legends. They are trustworthy historical records, and you are very welcome to fact check their details. And I think what you'll find is that time and time again, they prove to be reliable. So that's it for today. If you have questions about this topic, your Bible, Christianity, or anything along those lines, please add them to the comments and I will try to respond there or in a future video. And if you would like to see more content like this, or follow along with our current series on the Bible, please subscribe to this channel by clicking subscribe, the button just below this video. But either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.